speaker. You have information about Tim in your folder. I just want to say a few remarks. Tim Bannon was the first hire of Governor Daniel Malloy, coming to the governor's office from the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, where he was president and chief executive officer. As a chief of staff, Tim is known for a dry sense of humor, a collaborative approach, and a fashion sense unchanged since prep school. So please, let's welcome Tim Bannon.
Okay, so I'm back at the podium, and I'm about to embark on the one activity for which I am quite certain I will not receive an award. That will be the following set of remarks and observations. But bear with me. There's great energy in this room, and my goal is not to cause those energy levels to drop at all. And I'm delighted, as I've said before, to be with you today. I want to thank Betsy Crum for all her work in putting together today for all of us. And I also want to remember Bob Hohler. All of the time and effort that went into his work on behalf of the Melville Trust and building up the Partnership for Strong Communities and the wonderful work that is done. We should always honor, always remember, and always use as a source of inspiration for each of us to continue our own work. This is a very important event for all of us. And as Vin mentioned, in past years, it was the place where you got to hear from my boss, Dan Malloy. And I was in the audience with you 1 year ago today. I think I was sitting right there. And I listened to him along with another candidate for governor as they laid out their vision for Connecticut. They both made unequivocal promises. The first candidate promised he would balance the budget and he would not raise taxes. He would tackle what was then projected to be a $3.5 or $3.6 billion shortfall with spending cuts alone. As I sat there in the audience with many of you who are here today, it was obvious that you understood what that would mean, that state government would be transferring tax accountability to local governments and would essentially be withdrawing a substantial amount of its commitment to the citizens of Connecticut who need all of us the most. Then the second candidate took the stage and made his own set of unequivocal promises. He too would balance the budget, but he would do it without cutting aids to cities and towns. He would do it without cutting the state's share of local education spending. And he would do it while protecting the safety net that every decent, moral, and humane society provides to ensure that even its weakest members, whether weak from age or illness, or simply from bearing the grinding weight of enduring poverty, that those people who need us most could live in dignity and hope, hope born of a realistic belief that they would realize their fullest productive potential as contributors to the society to which, after all of us belong. And that candidate said he would do it without the gimmicks used to balance budgets in previous years. He would do it without borrowing to pay operating expenses. He would not defer pension payments for state employees. And he would develop, by using generally accepting accounting principles, a budget that was transparent, realistic, and understandable. That second candidate, the aforementioned Dan Malloy, and my boss, made quite a few promises on that day 1 year ago, leading me to ask on the first anniversary of that meeting, aren't you glad he kept those promises? You've heard the numbers before from other speakers, but I think we're all glad that the governor put together and defended and eventually signed a budget that provides $50 million of each of its 2 years to fund affordable housing options, $30 million to continue our successful supportive housing program, as well as $1.4 million for the Department of Social Services and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to fund the services that the residents of the new subsidized apartments that the capital funding would allow us to build could get the help they needed to enjoy the benefits of their new homes and to continue to grow and strengthen themselves. And by strengthening themselves, strengthen all of us. He made those promises. I see my friends from the Public Housing Residents Network, who I worked with at CHFA, and you've already heard he also signed that bill. We've come a long way together, and we really have done this together, but we still have a much longer way to go. Again, I think you've heard many of these statistics during the day. I don't want to dwell on them, but I do want to remind everyone of some of the challenges that we face. Affordability of housing in Connecticut remains at a crisis stage. Even as housing prices have come down, so have family incomes. As a result, a family earning the state's median income still cannot afford to buy a house in 112 of Connecticut's 169 towns. For Connecticut families that rent their homes rather than buy them, the picture, if anything, is even more bleak. In order to afford the fair market rental of a two-bedroom apartment in Connecticut, which is $1,215 per month, without paying more than 30% of the family income on housing, a household must earn $4,052 a month, or assuming a 40-hour work week, 52 weeks a year, the household's housing wage must be $23.37 an hour. Okay, that's what you have to earn as a household to afford a two-bedroom apartment in Connecticut. In fact, Connecticut renters don't earn that much. The average renter wage is $15.10 an hour. In other words, in order to afford the two-bedroom home, you would have to work. That renter would have to work 62 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, or there would have to be another wage earner as part of the family. Since our minimum wage in Connecticut is $8.25, there's another even more stark way to describe the lack of affordability of apartment homes. A minimum wage earner in Connecticut must work 113 hours per week, 52 hours per week, or have additional wage earners in the household. All of these figures, of course, are interesting, but it's misleading to wander too far down the path of figuring out how many hours a family has to work to afford to live in a decent home, and frankly, if those hours were even available, to afford to remain a family with the burden of that work. The hours that you need to work for many people just aren't there. We have more than 9% unemployment and a staggering but difficult to estimate underemployment among people whose hours or overtime have been cut back below the point that they previously experienced, and whatever their capacity to afford safe, affordable, and clean housing was before, it has been diminished. 1 year after we last gathered here, we've taken some big strides towards solving the affordable housing crisis in Connecticut, but the crisis has also taken on new dimensions, and the challenges to Connecticut's low-income families, those facing homelessness or already homeless, remain great. So how do we address this latest set of problems? We begin here. We begin by turning to your left, or turning to your right, or looking forwards, or looking back. In this room, we are the solution. And if the problem is growing, as it is, then we have to grow too. We have to grow quicker, grow smarter, grow more strategic, and grow more urgent. Let's develop a plan among ourselves and work with each other to make it operational. Let's make these annual meetings opportunities to revisit that plan, to fine-tune it, and let's make these meetings bookends between the work we'll do in the interim to move the cause of affordable housing creation forward. As part of that plan, let's have a clear communication strategy, and let's stick to it. A year ago, the Partnership for Strong Communities conducted a series of seminars under the title Housing as a Hub. Session by session, the links between housing and transportation, housing and education, housing and the environment, housing and economic development were discussed and researched and documented. White papers were produced, and they remain available. The upshot of all this was to enable every housing advocate to speak confidently and in detail about why the provision of clean, safe, and affordable housing is more, although you don't need more than this, is more than a moral imperative. But it's also the type of practical imperative that is clearly important if we as a society are to make progress during difficult economic times. We have to focus on those practical benefits and speak in those terms to develop the alliances that we need to refresh, to renew, or perhaps to found in order to have the support we need to move our cause forward. In a resource-constrained environment, we should recognize that the only resource that is really constrained is financial. There should be no constraint upon our energies, our commitments, our imaginations, or our dedication. And we can use those unconstrained resources to find the strategy and to effectuate the strategy that is necessary to be successful and to achieve our housing goals. When we talk about safe, clean, and affordable housing for veterans, for example, we're talking about beginning to repay an enormous debt that each of us owes to those who sacrificed for us by serving the military. So let's continue to reach out to groups that are dedicated to protecting the interests of veterans, because we're interested in protecting those interests too, and we can work with these people to achieve our common goals. Let's use the fact that the construction or renovation of housing also creates jobs. So let's talk to our friends in the housing construction industry and in the labor movement, because our goal is a goal they share. Let's talk to them. Let's strengthen those ties, and let's march forward together towards a goal that serves us all. These are just a couple of the groups that already are clearly aligned with us, but that we need to strengthen and to use to reach out to still more allies, as I say, in this resource-constrained environment in which we are currently coping. Let me also add that as we advocate our cause, let's also use the right tone. I've recently been involved in an effort to move a large jobs bill through a special session of the General Assembly by the end of this month with bipartisan support. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. And the experience convinces me that quiet but persistent persuasion can still work in the all too inflammatory political culture of today. And if we are able to pull this off, I think Connecticut can distinguish itself from the 49 other states and from the debate in Washington for not only the civility of our tone, but the concreteness of our accomplishments. Above the din, I really do believe the calm, reasonable voice will still stand out, will still be heard, and can still prevail, at least in Connecticut. Let me just close, because I'd like to leave some time for questions you have. I'm looking at Betsy. I think I'm already 2 minutes, 2 questions. I don't know. And if we can shorten that time, I will delete the answer portion of the question and answer period. I'm flexible on that stuff. But let me remind you of another thing. We don't any longer have to wait for someone to ride out of the hills to lead us in the effort to provide safe, clean, and affordable housing. We saw that leader on this stage 1 year ago. I've worked with him during the last year. That leader is Dan Malloy, the governor of Connecticut. And we have long awaited him, and he's here. But strangely enough, his presence may somehow dampen our own understanding of our roles. He is a leader. He is someone we can rely on. But that does not shift the responsibility of leadership away from each and every one of us. We all have to continue to lead. We all have to continue to play roles. We all have to reimagine a world in which affordable housing is available to anyone who needs it. And we have to strive with every ounce of our being to make that happen. So let me just leave here today knowing that by the end of this day, everyone else will leave here better informed, perhaps not by my own remarks, but by other activities during the course of the day. We have a chance to be better coordinated. We have a chance to be better equipped than we were 1 year ago. And let's return next year, proud of the progress we've made and rededicated to making still more. Thank you for your commitment and your time. Thank you.